to Parenting Kids with Complex Needs, a podcast for families navigating the unique challenges of raising children with medical, neurological, and developmental needs. I'm Carolyn, a mom who's been on this journey for over a decade raising my own amazing complex kid. I know firsthand how overwhelming it can be to juggle doctor's appointments, therapies, school accommodations, and everything else life throws your way, while still trying to take care of yourself. This podcast is your safe space to find guidance, resources, and encouragement. Whether your child has ADHD, sensory processing challenges, autism, or a medical diagnosis, you're in the right place. We'll dive into topics like advocating for your child's education, managing the financial stress of medical care, supporting their emotional well-being, and most importantly, taking care of you so that you can take care of them. I'll also bring on guest experts and share practical tools to make this journey a little easier. So grab your cup of coffee or reheat it for the third time, and let's navigate this together. You are not alone, and together we can make progress one step at a time. Let's get started. Welcome back to the podcast. If you've been listening in order, last week we were talking about sensory needs for your complex kid during the holidays. And today I just wanted to go a little more in depth into the different types of sensory needs your child might have, and talk a little bit more about all the senses that they could be experiencing challenges with, because there's actually 8 senses. And then finally, I want to get into a few resources that I would recommend to help your child, depending upon what types of sensory needs they have. Okay, so let's get started. So there are 4 types of sensory needs that your child might have, like 4 categories. So when we're thinking about how, the brain kind of regulates sensory input coming in, these are some of the challenges that your child could have. They might be avoiding, which would mean that they're experiencing too many sensations, like when we were talking about, too many lights, too many sounds, right? That would be avoiding, being hypersensitive or overwhelmed very easily. Those are indicators of avoiding, okay? Then you also have low registration, which would mean that they're not really registering sensory stimulation. Like they might be very passive and tired, even if they're having enough sleep, or not really interested in many activities. So they're like on a low register for sensory input, okay? Then we have those who are seeking, and they're the ones that feel like they're not experiencing enough sensation, and they're craving more sensory input. So those, just as an example, like your child or a child that that might be like walking along, but like leaning on the wall the whole time that they're walking, or just always jumping or climbing to get as much sensory input as they can, okay? They're the seeking. And then there's varied, meaning that they kind of alternate between seeking and avoiding and low registration. So once again, it's avoiding, low registration, seeking, and varied. And then the resource that I have available this week is, again, the SPD checklist. And I talked about that last week. I have revised it to include these types, and kind of expounded upon it a little bit, just based on research that I've been doing to make sure that you have, access to all this. So make sure that you get the free SPD, Sensory Processing Disorder Guide, in the show notes, or go to carolyngardnerconsulting.com/SPD for Sensory Processing Disorder, SPD Guide, okay? So then as we think about those 4 categories or types of sensory needs, where are we going to see those needs manifest? Let's talk about what the senses are. Now, when we were in kindergarten, we learned about the 5 senses, right? But there are actually 3 more, and I didn't know that either until I became a mom of a child with sensory needs. I want to also say that I am not the sensory expert. I'm coming to you as an expert in terms of learning what I've needed to learn for my child, but I would always say the best resource to go to, in my opinion, for these types of things would be an occupational therapist. So if you do not have an occupational therapist for your child, speak to your pediatrician about it if you have these types of concerns, because it was far too long before I realized that was the resource that our family needed, and it is just so important and so beneficial to have the input of an occupational therapist, okay? And they are very well informed with these 8 senses as opposed to just 5. So let me go through those real quickly, and just because I know that you know what 5 of them are, and I'm going to kind of go through also what might be indications that your child is struggling within that category, okay? So obviously we know sight or vision is one of the senses, right? So if they are a type where they're avoiding vision types of stimulation, that's when you might see them saying that the lights are too bright, okay? Or they're squinting and covering their eyes, or sensitive to the sun when they go out, if they are avoiding a sensory type of avoiding for vision. On the opposite, if they're seeking with vision, they might be watching a lot on the TV or on the tablet and can't quite get enough of that. Do you see kind of the difference? Then with low registration, their eyes might feel tired a lot, or they might lose their place a lot while they're reading, or just have difficulty following a moving object. So those are all the different ways that they might be struggling with vision sense, okay? Okay, so the second need that we want to talk about, or a second sense and the needs around it, would be auditory, obviously hearing. So let's think through that. What would avoiding sounds look like? So those are the kids that might cover their ears or walk away when somebody's talking too loudly, or they don't like the loud noises. Somebody who's seeking auditory sense would love loud music, all right? TV can't be on loud enough. They have the difficulty whispering to you. They're tapping a pencil on the table. And boy, do I wish that I had realized this when I was still teaching in the classroom, because I can see these little guys in my mind. I was a 2nd and 3rd grade teacher. So they are seeking sound input, okay? And then the ones with low registration, they might have difficulty following verbal directions. That's why we need to present things to them in multiple ways in school, right? If you're just going to say it to them, they're not going to hold on to it. They might frequently not respond to their name being called. They don't hear it. Or they may enjoy loud music or concentrate better with loud noises around, because again, the difference between avoiding and low registration is there's not enough input coming in for that low registration kid, so they're not aware of it. This is something that we deal with a lot, and it's been important for us to learn about, and just how you can support, bringing up that sensory input for those kids. So you see how there can be the different needs within that sensory category, right? Then smell. Okay, obviously avoiding would be when they refuse to eat something because of the way that it smells, or complaining about smells. that they smell in the house, or maybe something they don't want to wear, or sheets they don't want to wear because of the way it smells. Then someone that is seeking would love really strong smells, right? And then someone with low registration doesn't seem to notice the smells. Okay, we see the difference. Tactile. This is a big one, right? Because a lot of our kids that are neurodiverse have tactile needs. They might even learn best with a tactile environment. So if they are avoiding with tactile needs, they don't like their hands to get messy, or they're very, very ticklish, or they don't want to walk barefoot and like be in the grass or in the sand. They might avoid washing their hair, or they might not like their nails cut. Okay, like anything that they can kind of feel like that. Whereas if somebody's seeking that input, they love getting messy, right? They love just getting immersed in like activities like finger painting and sandboxes. They love crunchy foods. They love to rub their hands on objects, right? So they're looking for that tactile connection. And then someone with a low registration, they might not notice if somebody like touches them, or they might not notice that they have food on their face, or not notice when they get hurt, because they're just not, their sensory input's kind of lower when it comes to tactile. Now here's one of the ones you might not have heard of before, or not in this way. Vestibular refers to movement. Okay, so a child that's avoiding vestibular sense gets scared to move their feet off the ground, or scared of elevators, or scared of going up and down steps, or doesn't like to go on swings because of the insecurity of being up high. It's like a gravitational insecurity, not liking to be far away from the ground. Okay. And then the seeking might love climbing or jumping or swinging or spinning, right? And then the low registration, I think you're seeing like the difference between the two, and then where this would be, it's like they might move slowly, or lack the motivation to play, or lack the motivation to explore. They're very sedentary. So like in terms of movement, right? So the one is avoiding certain movement. The avoiding one, the seeking, can't get enough movement, and then the low registration isn't really moving enough. The next sense is proprioception, and that's talking about body awareness, okay, being aware of your body. And this one is a big one too, and it's actually more obvious with low registration and seeking kids. So if it's low registration in terms of body awareness, these are the kids that might like slump in a chair, lean on things, write very hard or very light with their pencil or writing implement, or do things too hard or too softly, and they might just come across as clumsy. Okay. Then someone who's really seeking input for body awareness, they love crashing into things and giving really deep, big hugs, or crawling into tight spaces. Might even be people that chew on things, like bite on pencils or bite on toys, or maybe, they've even gotten in trouble because they bit a person. And so it could be, I'm not saying that would be the only reason that would happen, but it could be something to look at with other data in terms of proprioception. And I didn't mention avoiding, because that's not really a category for this sense. Then we have oral sensory, which if they're avoiding oral stimulation, this would come across a lot with eating. So eating and picky eating actually involves more senses than just oral, which is something was really important for me to learn. But in terms of oral senses, these are the kids who are avoiding that input might prefer like very bland food or soft food, or refuse to eat anything that's crunchy. They might gag on things when they feel the texture of it or the taste of it. They also might hate having their teeth brushed. Okay. Now, the kids that are seeking, right, it's the opposite. So they love strong flavored foods, or they love chewing gum, or they love crunchy foods, right? Anything that's really going to give them that input there, right? And then the low registration kids might not notice different flavors of foods, or they don't mind spicy foods, or they might accidentally, like these are the things that are kind of interesting, I think, for the low registration. They might accidentally like stuff too much in their mouth and not really realize that, or just not realize if something falls out of their mouth, right? They're not recognizing those kinds of things. And I think, when you look at these things and you think of your kid, it's enlightening as to other reasons why some things might be happening than what you thought might be the reason, okay? And then again, your child could have a different type of sensory need depending on the sense. So the last of the 8 senses is interoception, and that's about your internal body sensations. Interoception, interoception. And then there's just the avoiding categories and the low registration categories for this one. So someone with avoidance in this category may be very sensitive to their feelings, always feel like they need to have something to drink. They might always feel like they need to use the bathroom. They have big emotions all the time. And then someone with a low registration in this area might be unaware or confused about their emotions, or they don't ever seem to feel hungry or thirsty. They're just not aware of it, or they might not be aware when they need to use the restroom. So these are all like internal feelings, including like their emotions. So when you think about your child and these different senses, again, look at the checklist that's available at carolinegardnerconsulting.com/SPD checklist, and think about whether they're avoidant, low registration, or seeking in these areas. And then remember that they could have different categories for each one. Okay. The other thing I want you to think about is when you're getting resources for them, right? And there's a lot of suggestions out there for tools that you can use for your child, like weighted blankets or fidget toys and things like that. Those are all great, but you're going to want to make those decisions based on what your child needs, right? So, for example, if you realize that from a visual standpoint, they are avoidant, you're not going to want to get them like some sort of LED lights for their room that blinks, or, because those are really popular. Or, if they don't need sensory input for touch, a weighted blanket might do the opposite. So what I really recommend that before you look at the resources that are provided in this episode in the show notes, that you first fill out the checklist, figure out what your child's needs are in each category, because remember, they could be avoidant in one and they could be seeking in another, and then base your purchases on your products on their needs. So why do they need a swing, or why do they need fidget toys, or Another really popular one are those hug sleeps, and I put that in the show notes too, but that would be if they really need that pressure, right? And they really need to feel those deep hugs. They're seeking that, right? If they don't want that feeling, you don't want to get that for them. So I hope that this is helpful. I know that understanding all the senses and that there were different types of categories for me was really helpful. So I hope it's helpful for you as well. And then again, the resources that are available this week in the show notes or from my website are the SPD checklist and also some recommendations for resources. Okay. So make sure to go to CarolynGardnerConsulting.com/SPD checklist for the checklist to determine what your child's sensory needs are. And then the resources is just CarolynGardnerConsulting.com/resources. All right. Have a great day. Next time we'll be doing some reflections on 2024 as a parent of a complex kid, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Take care.